Emmett Sloan stood in the dusty yard of his modest ranch, heart pounding as the wagon's dust settled. He'd pictured his mail-order bride as small, delicate, with gentle hands to tend his garden and soft words to ease his lonely evenings. But Willa Blaine, stepping down from the wagon, was anything but. At 6 feet tall in worn boots, with shoulders broader than most men in town, she looked like she could handle a plow better than a teacup. The oak ring he'd carved for her felt absurdly small in his pocket, and the letters she'd sent, careful script promising cozy meals and shared solitude, now seemed like a cruel misunderstanding. 3 months earlier, Emmett had placed an ad in the territorial newspaper, "Honest rancher seeks gentle companion for frontier life. Must appreciate simple pleasures and quiet evenings." Willa's single response had painted a picture of someone who understood the weight of isolation on a remote homestead. She never mentioned she stood taller than his barn door. Fletcher Knox, the merchant who arranged their meeting, climbed down from the wagon, his nervous glance darting between Emmett's stunned expression and Willa's imposing figure. Willa's confident posture faltered as she took in Emmett's slight frame and the way he craned his neck to meet her gaze. The silence stretched, broken only by the whispers of curious neighbors. Mrs. Henderson murmured to her husband behind her hand, and young Tommy Morrison pointed until his mother yanked his arm down. Emmett's cheeks burned with embarrassment unrelated to the afternoon sun. "You must be Emmett," Willa said, her voice deeper than he'd expected but kind. She extended a hand that engulfed his, her grip firm yet careful. "I suppose we should talk." Her tone mirrored the doubts racing through his mind. Fletcher busied himself unloading Willa's oversized trunk, his hurried movements betraying discomfort with the awkward situation he'd helped create. But as Willa surveyed the ranch, her expression surprised Emmett. She didn't sneer at the simple cabin or the patched corral fence. Instead, she nodded approvingly at his well-tended vegetable garden and neatly stacked firewood. Whatever shock she felt at his appearance, she hid with a grace he hadn't expected from someone who looked like she could snap him in half. The next morning brought chaos. Emmett's prize bull, Dakota, a 2,000-pound beast with a stormy temperament, had broken through the fence and was trampling Mrs. Henderson's prized flower garden 3 properties away. Her furious shouts echoed across the valley as the bull destroyed months of careful cultivation. Emmett stood on his porch, wringing his hands, watching the disaster unfold. 2 neighbors had already tried to approach Dakota, only to flee from his charging horns. The situation was becoming a neighborhood scandal that would haunt Emmett for years. "You can't rope him from here," Willa said calmly, appearing beside him with surprising quietness for her size. "Those men are going to get trampled if they keep approaching head-on." Emmett nodded miserably. Dakota's always been stubborn, but never like this. He'd dreaded this scenario since buying the bull, knowing his own lack of strength and experience made him ill-equipped to handle it. Without warning, Willa strode toward the chaos, her long legs covering ground quickly. Emmett hurried after her, protesting, "Willa, wait. He's dangerous." But she was already nearing Mrs. Henderson's property, where trampled roses and scattered border stones painted a grim picture. Mrs. Henderson stood on her steps, shrieking, "Your monsters ruined everything, Emmett Sloan. You'll pay for every plant." The neighbors' expressions ranged from sympathetic to hostile. Willa ignored the commotion, studying Dakota with intense focus. The bull pawed the ground, head lowered, ready to charge. 2 men with ropes hesitated at a safe distance. Then Willa did something astonishing. She climbed the fence and walked toward the bull, hands empty, movements slow but confident. The crowd fell silent, watching in horror and fascination. Even Mrs. Henderson's tirade stopped, her mouth agape. Dakota's head swung toward Willa, nostrils flaring, eyes wild. Emmett's throat tightened, every instinct urging him to stop her, but her deliberate calm held him in place. She spoke to the bull in a low, soothing tone, words flowing like a gentle stream. "Easy, big fellow," she murmured. "You're not really angry, just confused." She stepped closer, and Emmett's heart pounded. Dakota could charge at any moment, with nowhere for her to escape. But Dakota didn't charge. His pawing slowed, and his breathing steadied. Willa reached out, placing a hand on his neck, scratching behind his ear. The bull leaned into her touch, letting out a sigh-like sound. The crowd gasped. "Someone fetch a lead rope," Willa called, never breaking eye contact with Dakota. Fletcher scrambled to comply, bringing a rope from Emmett's barn. Willa fashioned a halter with practiced ease and led the bull out of the ruined garden, docile as a lamb. The neighbors parted, their faces a mix of awe and disbelief. As they passed, Willa caught Emmett's eye and offered a small smile that softened her features. "Your fence has a weak post on the north corner," she said casually. "We should fix that." Word of her feat spread like wildfire. By afternoon, neighbors found excuses to visit, their curiosity barely veiled by offers of meals or advice. Samuel Morrison arrived with his sons, ostensibly to help with the fence but clearly to see the woman who'd tamed Dakota. Morrison, a man who measured worth by physical strength, always made Emmett feel small. "Heard your lady has a way with livestock," he said, leaning against a post as Willa drove fence posts with powerful swings of a sledgehammer. "Willa grew up on a Montana cattle ranch," Emmett replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "She knows animals." He'd only learned this that morning, her letters never hinting at such expertise. Morrison's eldest son, a confident 19-year-old, offered to help with the post hole digger, implying Willa needed assistance. She declined politely, redirecting him to help Emmett with the wire. The boy's pride stung visibly, his brothers exchanging confused glances. Morrison's calculating look suggested he saw Willa's strength as a challenge to the community's norms. That evening, alone on the porch, the silence between Emmett and Willa felt heavy. She broke it first, staring at the darkening horizon. "This isn't what either of us expected, is it?" Emmett shifted, the chair creaking under his slight frame. "I should have been clearer in my letters. About being smaller, about feeling not enough for this life." His admission hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. Willa's fingers drummed her chair. "I saw a man today who cared more about my safety than his pride," she said gently. "Most would have stopped me, even if it meant getting hurt. And I should have written that I'm tired of being a curiosity, of people assuming I need someone to prove their strength against mine." Her words shifted Emmett's perspective. She carried her own burdens, seeking escape from judgment as much as he did. "What do we do now?" he asked. Willa pulled a worn letter from her pocket, his third, where he'd written that partnership meant making each other stronger, not smaller. "You meant this," she said. "But today showed you don't know everything about your land. And I noticed you came to me when Dakota got loose, not Morrison. That says something." Emmett nodded, surprised by his own instinct to trust her. "In my last letter," Willa continued, "I said I was tired of being alone, not just physically, but with my thoughts, my dreams. Maybe we both need someone to be lonely with sometimes, and strong with others." The distinction felt profound, challenging the rigid roles of their community. "So, we try," Emmett said. "We figure out partnership beyond the usual patterns." Willa stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "First, you're proposing properly. We're still strangers sharing a porch." Emmett's pulse quickened as he pulled the oak ring from his pocket. "I plan to do this right," he said, voice low. "To wait until I was sure you weren't disappointed by me." Willa examined the ring, slipping it on. It stopped at her knuckle, too small. "You made this?" she asked, marveling. 3 months, Emmett admitted, crestfallen. But Willa smiled. "You spent 3 months crafting this for a stranger, based on hope. That shows care, Emmett. Rings can be resized, character can't. Is that a yes?" he asked, uncertain. She placed the ring in his palm, closing his hands around it. "Ask me properly, because you want to." Emmett met her gaze, seeing kindness and humor. "Willa Blaine, will you marry me? Not because of letters, but because we could build something good together." "Yes," she said, adding, "but we resize this ring together. You teach me woodworking, I teach you cattle." Relief flooded him. Her conditions were about sharing, not changing him. 6 months later, In the community church, Emmett and Willa exchanged vows. The resized oak ring and a matching band she'd carved for him gleamed on their fingers. Their unconventional partnership had transformed the ranch into one of the valley's most productive. Dakota's cows promised future prosperity, and the fence held strong. Emmett learned strength wasn't just physical, and Willa valued his patience and planning. Neighbors' whispers turned to respect, even from Morrison, who nodded approvingly at their wedding. Their love, built on mutual acceptance, proved stronger than any frontier challenge.